Snow fell sideways in thick, blinding sheets, swallowing light, sound, and distance. The world beyond the perimeter lights barely existed, reduced to a shifting wall of white and shadow. Two squads stood in the open, rifles slung, shoulders hunched against a freezing wind that cut through layered cold-weather gear like it wasn't there. Somewhere in the line, a voice muttered, almost amused, "All this for one woman?" A few quiet chuckles followed. Another soldier shook his head. "Feels like overkill." Captain Ryan Keller heard it. He didn't comment, didn't shut it down, didn't look their way. The wind kept howling. Canvas snapped and strained as the tactical tent glowed dimly behind them. Inside, Colonel Thomas Calder stood beneath a flickering bulb, facing a whiteboard streaked with half-erased grid lines. No photo, no biography, no history, only a single word written in black marker. GHOST. Beneath it, a name that had been crossed out so many times the ink had torn the board's surface. Calder's voice stayed flat. "You're not hunting a person." A few heads lifted. "You're hunting a problem." He tapped a number written off to the side, a confirmed kill count, high enough to make several soldiers shift their weight. No one asked how it was verified. Outside, the storm sounded alive. Snow hammered the tent roof in relentless waves. Wind swept across the ground hard enough to erase fresh footprints within seconds. They believed she was already broken, already freezing, already dying. By dawn, only one of them would walk back out of that forest. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to FOB Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Captain Ryan Keller stood at the front edge of Alpha Squad, chin tucked into his collar, breath rising in slow, controlled clouds. Mid-30s, lean. Built the way long miles and heavy packs shape a man. He had spent most of his adult life in mountains. Not the kind on postcards. The kind that broke ankles, killed batteries, and punished mistakes without mercy. He believed in preparation, in repetition, in checklists. He believed most problems could be solved with enough planning and disciplined execution. Tonight, he planned to prove that belief correct. A few feet to his left stood Staff Sergeant Maria Kozlov. Shorter than most of the men, broad-shouldered, still as stone. Her face showed little emotion, but her eyes never stopped moving. Tree lime, snowdrifts, wind direction. She had earned her reputation in winter warfare courses that chewed up confident soldiers and spat them back humbled. Cold did not scare Kozlov. What scared her were unknowns. Behind Keller, Alpha Squad formed a loose line. Specialist Hannah Reed adjusted her gloves for the third time in a minute, not because they were loose, but because she needed something to do. Reed noticed things, small things. The way snow bent under weight, the way a boot print collapsed differently when someone was tired. She rarely spoke first, but when she did, people tended to listen. Private First Class Noah Brooks stood beside her, shifting his rifle from shoulder to shoulder. He grinned even though no one had said anything funny. Brooks joked when nervous. Everyone in Alpha knew it. He had joked through live fire drills. He had joked before air assaults. If Brooks was quiet, something was wrong. Tonight, he kept whispering half-comments under his breath. Sergeant Evan Cole stood at the rear of the formation. Early 40s. Combat deployments stacked on top of each other, calm in a way that came from having already seen the worst versions of things. Cole did not talk much. He did not need to. Men watched him without realizing they were doing it. On the Bravo side, Corporal Lucas Bennett kept rubbing his jaw as if trying to work out stiffness. Bennett had experience, plenty of it. But his eyes carried something unsettled. He did not like this assignment. He did not like the way the briefing had felt unfinished. Specialist Aaron Park crouched near the tent entrance, adjusting his thermal optic, then adjusting it again. Park was good with sensors. Very good. But tonight his movements were sharp, fast. like he expected something to jump out of the dark. Private Sofia Ramirez stood stiffly beside him. Young, new to winter operations, eyes bright with effort, trying very hard not to look like the youngest person present. Inside the tent, Colonel Thomas Calder finished studying the board. He did not pace. He did not raise his voice. He did not attempt inspiration. He spoke like a man reading weather data. Target is a former U.S. Army long-range reconnaissance operator. A few heads tilted. Disappeared several years ago. Calder paused. Every team sent after her has suffered losses. Silence followed. No bodies recovered. Someone cleared their throat. Calder did not acknowledge it. She operates alone. No elaboration. No timeline. No photo. Keller waited for the slide deck that never came. Waited for a face. A name. Anything. Nothing appeared. Keller felt a flicker of irritation. This felt like myth-building. Command loved turning bad intelligence into legend. He told himself what he had told his soldiers for years. People exaggerate when they're cold. People exaggerate when they're scared. People look for monsters because monsters feel easier than admitting mistakes. Calder continued. Mission parameters are simple. Find. Confirm. Capture if possible. If not, neutralize. Storm expected to worsen overnight. Visibility will drop. Wind chill dangerous. Extraction window at first light if you request it. He looked directly at Keller. You won't request it. Keller did not respond. He nodded once. Orders were orders. Outside, the wind seemed to rise, as if reacting to the words. Keller stepped out first. Kozlov fell in beside him. Alpha Squad followed. Bravo Squad behind them. The tent flap dropped closed. Light vanished. Within 10 steps, the glow from the perimeter lamps disappeared. The world collapsed into snow, wind, and narrow beams of white from helmet-mounted lights. No base. No radios humming in the background. No warmth waiting behind a wall. Once you step into deep winter wilderness, the world you came from stops existing. Everything that matters becomes the next footstep, the next breath, the next decision. And somewhere ahead, invisible and unmoving, the ghost was waiting. The movement was slow from the first step, like the forest itself resisted them. Snow came up to their knees in some places, then disappeared into hard crust in others, forcing every stride to become a decision. Wind never stopped. It hit from the side, from behind, sometimes from straight ahead, tearing at hoods and slapping exposed skin until even blinking felt painful. Radio chatter stayed clipped and professional, but the tone changed as the minutes stretched into hours. No one wasted words. No one joked anymore. Alpha pushed east. Bravo pushed west. Parallel lanes through a wide maze linked only by timed check-ins and the faint confidence that 2 squads were better than 1. That confidence lasted less than an hour. Bravo found the first sign. Corporal Lucas Bennett crouched beside a rucksack half sunk in powder. It was a standard issue pack, straps undone, laying on its side like it had been set down carefully and forgotten. He pressed the back of his glove against it. Warm. Not warm like a fire. Warm like a body had been against it recently. No blood. No drag marks. No disturbance around it. Just clean snow and a pack that should not have been there. Bennett keyed his mic. Bravo to Alpha. I've got abandoned gear. Looks recent. Static snapped between syllables, then cleared. Captain Keller's voice came back calm. Copy. Any tracks? Bennett scanned with his light. The beam crawled over white ground, the edges of drifts, the base of trees. Nothing. No tracks, Bennett said, then hesitated because it sounded impossible. I mean, none. Radio crackled again. No explanation followed. No one said what everyone was thinking. Keller did not like mysteries in the field. He liked causes. Effects. A chain you could follow and fix. He told himself the pack had been blown out of place. He told himself wind could do strange things. But the way it sat there, half-buried and warm, felt like a deliberate message. Alpha began noticing their own signs soon after. Boot prints. Theirs at first tracked clean in the soft powder. Keller ordered them to stagger and avoid stepping in each other's tracks to preserve any other sign they might need. Then Reed stopped. She crouched slowly and angled her helmet light down. A set of boot prints crossed their lane at a diagonal. Deep impressions, clean heel to toe. Someone moving steady, not stumbling. Keller leaned in, feeling a small flicker of relief. Finally. Something real. Then the prints ended. Not faded. Not blown over. Ended. As if the person had stepped off the earth. Reed looked back at Keller. "Sir." Her voice had a tone Keller had learned to respect. Not panic. Not speculation. Just a problem presented cleanly. Keller stared at the last print. He swept his light around, searching for where it continued. A drift. A slope. Anything that could explain a change. Nothing. Private Brooks let out a short, nervous laugh that died immediately. "That's not normal." Keller snapped his eyes toward him. "Focus. We're not doing ghost stories." Brooks swallowed hard and nodded, but his gaze kept flicking toward the trees like he expected them to lean closer. They pushed on. Hours passed in a white blur. The cold gnawed at their hands and faces, not dramatic, not sudden, just constant and patient, like something chewing slowly through their endurance. Fingers went numb inside gloves. Jaw muscles tightened. Breathing became louder than it should have been. Batteries drained faster than they had on training runs. Keller watched his GPS drop percentage like it was bleeding out. Every few minutes, Reed tapped her equipment, checking power, checking settings, shaking her hands to keep feeling in her fingers. Sergeant Cole stayed steady, scanning rear, never complaining, never asking questions. And still the forest gave them nothing to shoot at. Only absence. Bravo's second check-in came late. When it did, Maria Kozlov's voice sounded different, still controlled, but heavier. "Bravo to Alpha. We lost Holt." Keller stopped walking. Alpha halted with him, forming a staggered line without needing to be told. Keller keyed his mic. "Say again." Kozlov answered immediately, as if she had been repeating it to herself. "Private Daniel Holt." He was 10 feet behind Ramirez. Then he wasn't. Keller felt his stomach tighten. "Contact? No," Kozlov said. "No sound. No struggle. No tracks." On Alpha's side, Brooks whispered, 10 feet? Keller ignored him. "Kozlov," Keller said, keeping his voice even. "Confirm last known position. Mark it." "We did," she replied. "And we searched a radius. Nothing." Keller stared into the storm, trying to make sense of it. If Holt had fallen into a hole, there would be a break in the snow. If he'd been dragged, there would be a trail. If he'd been shot, there would be sound or panic. But this was none of those. It was like a person had been removed between one breath and the next. Kozlov's voice cut back in. "Spacing is now arm's length, no exceptions." On Bravo, she physically reached out and gripped Ramirez's sleeve, tightening the formation until they moved like a single organism. Bennett close on her other side, Park and the others forming a tight string through the trees. It should have made them safer. Instead, it made the tension worse, because when professionals close up like that, it means something is wrong enough to break doctrine. Minutes later, Specialist Park's voice came sharp over the radio. "I saw her." Keller's head lifted. "Say again, Bravo." Park spoke fast, words stumbling over each other. "Between the trees. Close. I saw a woman, just a second. Hood up. She was right there." Kozlov cut in immediately. "Park, thermal?" Park hesitated, then answered with a strange edge in his voice. "Thermal shows nothing." "Night vision?" Kozlov asked. "Nothing," Park said again. "Just trees." Snow. But I saw her. Keller looked at Reed. Reed's eyes were wide behind her goggles, but she didn't speak, because this was the moment when shared reality began to fracture. If one soldier sees something no sensor can confirm, it is either a mistake or a warning. Either way, it spreads doubt. Kozlov tried to lock it down. "Park, you're cold and tired. You're seeing movement." "I'm not," Park insisted. "I'm telling you." The transmission cut mid-sentence. Not a clean click. Not a deliberate stop. It cut like someone had reached in and closed a fist around the signal. Static filled Keller's headset. He held the mic down. "Bravo, this is Alpha." "Say again." "Bravo, respond." Only static. Keller felt something move in his chest that he hadn't felt all night. Fear, but not the kind he'd trained for. Not incoming fire fear. Not contact fear. Absence fear. The kind that comes when the rules you rely on stop applying. The forest felt wrong now, not in a supernatural way. In a practical way. Sound behaved strangely. Wind masked footsteps. Snow swallowed echoes like a blanket thrown over reality. Keller pressed forward because stopping felt worse. Alpha moved faster, but faster in deep snow only meant you exhausted yourself quicker. He forced steady pace, steady breathing, steady commands. Then they found the second sign. Half buried near the base of a pine, a handheld radio sat upright in the snow like it had been placed there. Keller knelt and brushed powder away. The radio was on. The channel was open. And from its speaker came breathing. Slow. Human. Close. No words. No response. Just a steady inhale and exhale, as if someone was holding the mic down and listening. Keller stared at it, frozen for a moment that had nothing to do with temperature. He tried speaking into his own radio. "Bravo, this is Alpha. If you can hear me, key up." The breathing continued. No answer. Reed leaned closer, her eyes tightening. "Sir, that's not background." Keller didn't respond because he already knew. That breathing wasn't accidental. It was intentional. It was someone letting them hear life and giving them nothing else. Keller stood slowly and looked into the trees. And in that moment, the thought hit him with the weight of a hand on his throat. They were not hunting. They were being allowed to move, allowed to believe they had choices, allowed to keep walking deeper. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have trusted your training and pushed on? Or would you have admitted the truth no soldier wants to say out loud? That the mission was already over and the forest was deciding who got to leave. Emily Carter lay beneath the snow, and from a distance there was nothing to see. No outline, no heat shimmer, no disturbed surface, only a shallow drift shaped by wind and time. Snow dusted her hood, her shoulders, the curve of her pack, building so slowly it looked natural. If someone had stared directly at her position, they would have seen nothing more than another piece of winter. Her breathing stayed slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Long intervals. Controlled. Her heart rate sat low, steady, trained into obedience years ago and kept that way by necessity. She listened, not for voices, not for radios, for rhythm. The crunch pattern of heavy packs shifting weight. The subtle difference between someone stepping with confidence and someone stepping with doubt. She could hear which soldiers carried more gear, which ones favored one leg, which one walked half a step wider than the rest. Leader. Always slightly wider. Protective spacing. She could hear nervousness, not as words, as micro-stutters in movement, boots that scuffed instead of planted. Pauses that lasted a fraction of a second too long. She did not need optics to know who they were. She did not need night vision to know where they were. The forest told her. Her father's voice floated through memory, not as a sentence, but as a principle. Let terrain fight for you. Do not rush. Winter hides patience. Master Sergeant Daniel Carter had taught her that long before she ever wore a uniform, before long-range reconnaissance, before deployments, before paperwork and call signs and classification levels. He had taught her as a girl, standing on a frozen ridge with wind slicing through their jackets. He had knelt, scooped up a handful of snow, and let it run through his fingers. "See how it crusts on top?" he'd said. "Looks solid." Isn't. He had walked 10 feet to the left and stomped. The ground collapsed to his knee. Same slope. Same snow. Different structure. He had pointed at faint grooves etched into the surface. Wind scouring. "These tell you where ice hardens underneath," he'd said. "These tell you where it doesn't." Later, after she nearly lost feeling in her hands during a winter training hike, he had made her sit, wrapped her fingers in his gloves, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Hypothermia lies," he told her. "Makes you think you're fine. Makes you think you're warm. Makes you make stupid decisions." She never forgot that. She never trusted comfort. She never trusted ease. Now she watched Alpha moving downslope toward a basin she knew well. Soft ground. Hidden pockets. Snow laid over old stream channels that never fully froze. From above, it looked harmless. From ground level, it was a trap. She did not follow them. She moved ahead of them. Wide arc. Slow. Using trees as visual breaks. Using wind gusts to mask any sound she made. She stopped near a small rise overlooking their path. Kneeled. Reached down with a gloved finger and carved a short line into the snow. Not a symbol. Not a word. Just a shallow mark, placed low enough that only someone scanning close to the ground would ever notice. Then she slid backward and melted into a depression beside a fallen log. She waited. Back with Alpha, Specialist Hannah Reed felt a tightening in her chest she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was pattern disturbance. The same feeling she got when something in a picture didn't belong, even if she couldn't immediately identify what it was. She slowed and swept her light closer to the ground. Not far. Not wide. Close. She saw it. A faint line in the snow. Too straight. Too intentional. Not a boot. Not a branch. Not animal sign. Reed crouched. "Sir," she said quietly. Keller turned. She pointed. "Look at that." Keller knelt beside her. He studied the line. Wind could have made it. Maybe. Drifting snow could do strange things. He told himself that. "Wind pattern," he said after a moment. "We're not chasing scratches in snow." Reed didn't argue, but she didn't like the answer. They moved on. 10 minutes later, Brooks nearly tripped. He looked down and froze. A glove stood upright in the snow. Not half buried. Not crushed. Standing, fingers pointing slightly upward, as if someone had pressed it into place. It was a standard-issue cold-weather glove. Clean. Dry. Brooks swallowed hard. "She's close," he whispered. No one responded. No one told him to shut up. No one laughed. Keller stared at the glove longer than he wanted to. Then he looked up. Trees. Snow. Dark. Nothing else. The forest did not move. The forest did not answer. Wind slid through branches with a low, constant moan. Snow drifted sideways. No footsteps. No voices. No shapes. Just the overwhelming sensation that something unseen was watching them measure their own distance from safety. And somewhere ahead, unseen and unhurried, Emily Carter adjusted her breathing and waited for them to take the next step into ground that would decide who stayed and who disappeared. Staff Sergeant Maria Kozlov had learned to respect ice the way other people respected a loaded weapon. Ice did not announce itself. It waited for weight, then punished the exact moment you trusted it. Her boots found a hard patch hidden under fresh powder, and the world snapped out from under her. She went down fast, shoulder first, then helmet, the back of her head striking something solid with a dull, muffled thud. For half a second, sound folded in on itself, like someone had stuffed cotton into her ears. The sky spun, white and darker white, trees stretching and bending as her vision tried to hold on. She blinked, once, twice, and the wind turned into a distant roar. She heard Parch shouting her name. Not close, not far. Somewhere inside the storm. Then the shouting cut off so suddenly, it felt like a hand had closed over his mouth. Kozlov tried to push up, but her arms didn't respond the way they should have. Her gloves scraped snow, fingers numb, muscles slow. The cold didn't sting anymore, and that scared her more than the fall. She forced herself onto one elbow and stared at the space where her squad had been. No shapes, no movement. No lights bobbing between trees. Only a field of snow and a line of dark trunks that looked identical in every direction. Her radio hissed once and went dead. She reached for her weapon out of reflex, and her hand closed on nothing. Her rifle was gone. Her pack was gone. The strap that should have crossed her chest was missing, as if she had never worn one at all. Kozlov's breathing tightened into short bursts until she forced it down, forced air into her lungs and out again, slow enough to think. Panic wasted heat, wasted time, and she could feel how thin time was becoming. She rolled her head and saw the writing beside her. Letters carved into the snow deep enough that wind had not softened them yet. Walk south. Her throat went dry. For a moment, she stared at the message as if it might change into something more reasonable if she looked long enough. It didn't. Her hands shook as she got her boots under her and stood, unsteady, weight shifting to find balance. Her head still rang from the helmet strike, and the world felt slightly delayed, like her eyes were half a beat behind reality. She took a step, then another, moving by instinct at first, then by decision. South meant something. South meant lower ground, less exposure, a chance at tree line that might eventually connect to a route back. South also meant the ghost wanted her going south. Kozlov hated that part. She walked anyway. On Alpha's net, Captain Ryan Keller was already trying to pull the operation back into order. He had lost Bravo's steady check-ins, lost their short confirmations and clipped acknowledgments. In bad weather, radios failed. In cold, batteries died. That was normal. The problem was the way Bravo's signal failed. Not gradual. Not weak. Cut. A burst of transmission finally cracked through, broken and warped by static. South, message, walk. Keller froze. Mid-step, hand lifted to signal a halt. Reed stopped beside him, eyes alert, reading his posture before his words. Sergeant Cole tightened the spacing behind them without being told, sensing the shift in Keller's tone. Keller keyed his mic. Bravo, say again. Who is this? Static swallowed the channel. Then nothing. He tried again, voice firm, controlled. Bravo, respond. Give me a status. Only the wind answered, screaming through trees, carrying snow like sand. Keller's jaw tightened. The plan in his head had begun as lines and grids, lanes and checkpoints. It was turning into a loose thread in his hands, slipping faster every minute. He signaled forward again, and Alpha pushed on, but their forward movement felt less like an advance and more like being pulled. Private Mason Ward was the next to break the rhythm. It happened in a blink. One step on hard crust, the next step into softness that wasn't just snow. His legs sank past the knee as if the ground had opened to accept him. Ward yelped and grabbed for the nearest branch, weight twisting, panic shooting through him. He tried to wrench himself out and only sank deeper, snow collapsing around his thigh with a sucking sound that made Keller's stomach turn. Sergeant Evan Cole was already moving. Cole hit the ground, crawling close, spreading his weight to keep from triggering the same trap. He hooked his arms under Ward's armpits and pulled with a controlled grunt, muscles straining, boots digging for purchase. Ward screamed once, then clamped his jaw shut, eyes wide with humiliation and pain. Cole hauled him free, and Ward's ankle folded at an angle that didn't belong in a human body. He gasped, face going pale under the red light of Keller's headlamp. Keller crouched, already knowing what the medic assessment would be. Ward couldn't walk, not in this. Not in knee-deep snow with wind tearing the warmth out of lungs. Reed looked away for a moment, swallowing hard, then met Keller's eyes again. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Keller made the decision that cut like a blade. They set Ward against a tree in a sheltered pocket where wind was slightly less violent. Cole handed him an emergency kit and extra chemical warmers, pressing them into his gloves like a promise. Keller marked the coordinates on the GPS, the screen dimming as if even the device resented being used. "We're coming back," Keller said, forcing the words out with authority. Ward nodded too fast, as if agreement could make it true. In Keller's chest, something cold settled. He knew they would not come back. They moved on with the pace of people pretending the math still worked. The GPS began to behave strangely not long after. At first it was small. The arrow jittered. The bearing flickered. Keller blamed the storm, blamed satellite loss, blamed anything that didn't require him to admit the forest was beating him. Then Reed stopped and pulled her own device out, comparing logs in the weak light. She frowned, gloved finger tracing the track lines. "Sir, we've been here before." Keller stared at the screen. The route line looped like a careless knot. They had walked the same valley more than once, turning wide arcs that somehow returned to the same cluster of trees, the same slope angle, the same windbreak. He felt humiliation rise hot in his throat. He had trained for this. He had led soldiers through harsher terrain than this. He had trusted his sense of direction like he trusted his own heartbeat. Now the evidence sat in his hands and told him the forest had been steering them like cattle. Keller forced his voice to remain calm. "We're shifting. We go south." No one questioned it. No one offered an alternative. Even Brooks was quiet for once, as if he sensed that jokes had expired. They pushed through the next stand of trees and found the message waiting in a shallow drift, carved with the same deliberate depth as Kozlov's had been. O.N. Lee, one needs to leave. Choose. For a moment, nobody moved. Wind slid across the letters, trying to soften them, but the cuts held their shape, sharp and clean. Private Brooks stared at it, and his face did something Keller had never seen before. He laughed. A high, broken sound, too loud for the empty woods. It echoed once, then died in the snow. Brooks kept laughing as if he couldn't stop, as if his body had chosen laughter because it was the only thing left that wasn't screaming. Then the laughter folded into sobbing. He wiped his face with his glove, smearing ice across his cheek, and shook his head hard like he could shake the truth out. "She's not hunting us," he choked out. "She's guiding us." Keller stared at him, anger flaring, but he couldn't find words strong enough to fight what he already felt. Because the messages were not threats, they were directions. And every time they tried to ignore them, the forest punished them back into the path. Reed's voice came quiet beside Keller. "Sir, we either follow south or we die in circles." Keller swallowed the taste of pride and nodded once. They moved, tighter now, 3 remaining in Alpha's forward element, with Cole behind, Reed close, Brooks half a step off to the right. Snow thickened again, wind rising, and visibility shrank until the world became a narrow tunnel of light and shadow. Then Keller saw a shape. A figure between trees. A hooded outline, low and still, watching. His body reacted before his mind finished confirming. He raised his rifle and fired. The sound cracked through the valley like a whip. For a second, the muzzle flash turned snowflakes into bright sparks. Then the echo bounced back in a confusing chorus, making it sound like shots from multiple directions. Keller blinked hard, eyes watering from the flash and wind. When his vision cleared, the space between the trees was empty. No figure, no movement. No tracks. Nothing but drifting snow and black branches. Brooks whispered something that Keller didn't catch. Then the ground gave way. Not under Keller. Not under Reed. Under Brooks. It happened so fast there was no time for a scream. One step, solid crust. The next, collapse. The snow dropped inward as if a mouth had opened, and Brooks vanished into a narrow ravine hidden beneath a thin shell of ice and powder. Keller lunged forward, but the edge crumbled under his boot and he jerked back, heart slamming against his ribs. He shouted Brooks's name, voice raw, leaning down into the dark gap. No answer came back. No cry, no movement. Only the wind passing over the opening, carrying cold air up from below like a breath. Reed stood beside Keller, frozen, her eyes locked on the hole, her chest rising and falling fast. Sergeant Cole moved to Keller's other side and planted a hand on his shoulder, steadying him the way you steady someone standing too close to a ledge. Keller stared into the darkness until his eyes burned. Then he slowly lifted his gaze. The forest remained silent. No footsteps approached. No shape retreated. No proof that anything had happened except a missing man and a hole in the snow that looked like it had always been there. Keller felt the cold sink deeper than his clothing. It slid into his bones, into his thoughts, into the part of him that had believed discipline could solve anything. Only Keller and Reed remained in the storm's narrow world, with Cole behind them, and the silence returned so completely it felt like the forest had reset itself. Somewhere out there, unseen and patient, the ghost had made her choice, and now she was waiting to see which of them would be the one who walked out by dawn. The storm did not end all at once. It loosened its grip. Wind that had screamed for hours sank into a low, steady whisper. Snow that had come sideways began to fall straight down, lighter, thinner, almost gentle. Gray dawn leaked into the forest in narrow strands, seeping between branches and softening the brutal contrasts of night. For the first time since stepping off the perimeter, Captain Ryan Keller could see more than a few yards ahead. That should have brought relief. It didn't. Keller and Specialist Hannah Reed moved slowly, boots crunching softly in new snow, every sense stretched tight. The world felt wrong in daylight. Too quiet, too open. They passed between two bent pines and stepped into a small clearing. Keller stopped without realizing he had. In the center of the clearing lay a neat arrangement. Rifles placed side by side. Helmets lined in a shallow arc. Radios stacked carefully. Packs arranged as if for inspection. Alpha and Bravo equipment. Every piece clean. Every piece intact. No bodies. No blood. No drag marks. Just organized absence. Keller's breath caught. He looked down instinctively. The holster on his thigh was empty. His sidearm was gone. Cold slid through his chest that had nothing to do with temperature. Then Reed's hand tightened on his sleeve. Keller followed her gaze. A woman sat on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing. No rifle, no pistol. Hands resting loosely on her knees. Hood up. Face pale from cold, but calm. Not tense. Not afraid. Eyes steady, watching Keller the way a professional studies terrain. Not hostile, not pleading. Waiting. Keller raised his rifle, then hesitated, unsure why. His voice came out rough. "Where are my people?" The woman did not answer that. She tilted her head slightly. "Were you ordered to come here?" Keller stared at her. "Yes." She nodded once, as if confirming something she already knew. "So was I." Once. Reed felt something click in her memory, sharp and sudden. A name from a classified briefing. A file marked unresolved. Her breath caught. "Emily Carter," Reed whispered. The woman did not correct her. "Former Army long-range reconnaissance operator. Listed KIA. Declared dead." Emily Carter shifted her gaze back to Keller. She lifted one gloved hand and pointed into the trees. "South. Walk." Keller lowered his rifle slowly, not because he trusted her. Not because he understood her. But because some instinct deeper than training told him that aiming at her was pointless. He swallowed, throat tight. "Why me?" he asked. "Why let me live?" Emily Carter studied him for a long moment, not with anger. Not with curiosity, with something that looked almost tired. "Someone has to remember," she said. The words were quiet. They carried anyway. Keller felt Reed shift beside him, her breath shallow, her eyes never leaving Emily's face. "You followed orders," Emily continued. "So did I." Once. No bitterness colored her voice, no accusation. Just a statement of fact. Silence stretched between them. Wind brushed lightly through the clearing, lifting a few loose snowflakes and setting them drifting again. Emily looked past Keller, toward the arranged equipment, toward the empty space where men had stood only hours earlier. "I don't hunt soldiers," she said. Keller's jaw tightened. "Then what do you call this?" Emily's eyes returned to him. "I remove people from places they should not be." The sentence landed heavier than any threat. She shifted her weight slightly on the log. "The mountain decides how," she added. Keller opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because in his mind, every version of the night replayed itself. The lost rucksack, the warm pack, the radio breathing, the messages, the ground opening, the loops, the silence. There had been no ambush, no kill zone, no choke point, no moment where better tactics would have changed the outcome, no amount of firepower would have mattered, no number advantage, no formation. The forest had been the weapon. They had never been fighting a person. They had been fighting a system of terrain, patience, and consequence, and they had lost before they understood the rules. Emily rose to her feet. She did not sling a weapon. She did not check her surroundings. She simply stood, unhurried, as if nothing in the forest posed a threat to her. Keller took an involuntary step forward. "What happens now?" he asked. Emily lifted her hand again and pointed south. "You walk home." Her eyes met his one last time. "You tell them what you saw," she said, "what you didn't see, and what it costs to come here." Snow drifted down around her hood, clinging to fabric, softening edges. She took one step backward, then another. The wind shifted slightly, lifting loose powder into the air. For a moment, her outline blurred. Then it was gone. No retreating footsteps. No breaking branches. No visible trail. Just trees and falling snow. Keller stood where he was, chest tight, trying to reconcile what he had just witnessed with everything he had been trained to believe about combat. Reed did not speak. Neither did Keller. They stood in the clearing with the arranged gear and the weight of names that would never be called again. After a long moment, Keller turned. He did not look back. Reed fell in beside him. South. They began walking. Not as hunters, not as a team on mission, but as two survivors carrying a story neither of them wanted to own. Behind them, the clearing slowly disappeared under fresh snow, as if it had never existed. And somewhere beyond sight, Emily Carter was already gone, moving with the mountain that had chosen her as its messenger. The debrief room smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. White walls, fluorescent lights, a place designed to feel controlled, safe. Captain Ryan Keller sat at a metal table with a paper cup warming his hands, even though his fingers no longer felt cold. Across from him, Colonel Thomas Calder flipped through a thin folder. No photos inside, no recovered equipment logs, no casualty remains, just typed statements and timestamps. Calder looked up. "Where are the bodies?" Keller did not hesitate. "There aren't any." Calder studied his face, searching for uncertainty. He didn't find it. Keller went on, voice steady but hollow. "There was no firefight. No engagement. No scene." Calder closed the folder slowly. "You're not the first to say that." Keller's eyes lifted. Calder leaned back in his chair. "Over the past several years, we've sent multiple elements into that region. Different units. Different leaders. Same terrain." He paused. "Few survivors." Keller felt his jaw tighten. "And the ones who make it out?" Keller asked. Calder's mouth flattened. They describe a woman who is there and not there. Messages. Missing people. No bodies. No tracks. Snow and silence. Keller stared at the tabletop. Calder continued, "Higher headquarters doesn't like unresolved problems." Keller looked up sharply. "They shouldn't send anyone else." For a moment, Calder looked older than his rank. "They will," he said quietly. The words landed without drama. Just fact. Weeks later, Keller signed transfer paperwork. Hot weather unit. Flat terrain. No snow. No winter operations. No cold weather training blocks. No mountains. No one questioned the request. Keller never explained it. At night, he still dreamed. Not of gunfire. Not of explosions. Of white silence. Of radios breathing. Of gloves standing upright. Of a clearing filled with perfectly arranged gear. And of calm eyes watching him, not with hatred, not with anger, but with something heavier, understanding. Keller woke from those dreams with his heart racing, even when the room around him was warm. Some battles cannot be won with bullets. Some truths can only be survived. Some sacrifices are never written into reports. Some courage never earns medals. Some people walk away from war but never stop carrying its weight. They choose distance instead of obedience, silence instead of slogans, isolation instead of applause. Not because they are broken, but because they understand something most never will, that survival is not always about winning. Sometimes it is about refusing to become what the world expects you to be. Stories like this are not about ghosts. They are about the quiet humans behind the legends, the ones who disappear so others can keep believing in order, structure, and control. And the ones who live with what they saw, even when no one wants to hear it. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more FOB veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.